When I first started using MBTI, I mostly wanted to learn about myself as well as how other people seem to see people who are like me as well. And I'd been um, on a mission in Japan for my church, and you spend a lot of time with the same person you basically can't be away from each other at all for like safety reasons, for, to make sure you're not doing stupid things. It's just the way it's done. And I um, got to know a lot of people, and I realized that everybody is actually pretty darn weird. But um, in the end, I really wanted to, when I got back home, really research different ways of measuring personality. And I had taken the MBTI for a college class for effective study and learning, and it had to do with career advice too. Anyway, so I had known a little bit about MBTI, and I wanted to learn way more about it, so that's what I did when I got home. And it was great, and for a long time, it dominated my thinking whenever I thought about people. And now it is sort of always in the background, but it's I feel like I'm treating it a lot more appropriately now, um, because it really is irrelevant most of the time. It's irrelevant when you first meet people. You have no idea what face people are putting on, how they're changing themselves in order to um, meet new people. You still get a strong sense, and you can't deny it though when you see certain things. Like extroverted feeling is one of the easiest things to see for me now. I was all into visual typing a while back, and some of the things from that actually are solid. There are some visual consistencies that certain personalities have. So I haven't left that behind completely, but um, in general, I really it takes the role that MBTI plays in my life is sort of in the background. I don't. It's just something interesting about people, and there's probably something real behind it with neuroscience and just how you have a bell curve of different strategies of behaving in social circumstances and in life in general, and those dimensions mostly scientifically validated by using the Big Five, but you can map from between the Big Five and MBTI, of course, somewhat well, not really well, but um, and that's interesting that it's cool that it came from Jungian typology, which was a guy observing people and identifying consistent patterns. So it's cool that a statistically, scientifically validated personality um, metric like the Big Five would um, map somewhat to something that a guy learned. I mean, it was Carl Jung, but still. Anyway, so it's real and useful. Um, you have to get past what everyone thinks it should be useful for. I believe that within every field there is a role for each type, and so using it for strict career advice won't make sense. But um, but it actually explains a lot in the way people do program. For example, I worked with an ENFP, um, as doing software engineering, and that is generally not the first career that I think an ENFP would be told they should do. But the way he did code was different than the way I did. I wanted things to be clean, neat, efficient, like interesting and beautiful and very flexible, easy to change. Um, and what he wanted to do is push the limits in certain ways of like computational efficiency. He was like the happiest I ever saw him was when he when he wrote an algorithm to filter something, and ended up taking way less time than what was used before. Like it was 100 times faster, basically. And like it had very little to do with what actually mattered in the project, but it was still awesome. And so like it's sort of random, extreme value that was unexpected, but and honestly, the users, it only really improved 10% of what was causing the page to load slowly. And that 10% it really optimized. So yeah, I think that the more people you have in a company or on a project or something, the more room you have for a diverse set of approaches. So basically, and the more companies, the more startups you have, each startup can have its own approach as well. But anyway, so I wouldn't use it as strict career advice, but it does still inform you on sort of what kind of things to expect. I worked with an ISTJ on the same team, and he hated both of us. I was always saying, "Hey, there's this new version that came out. It's gonna make our code way better." And he's like, "Well, I think we should plan. We should probably ask the manager's name, what he thinks and when the appropriate time to add that would be. And if everyone wants to do it, I say, why not?" But I was always like, look at the industry, look at the trends, look at the like we got to jump on this right now. Anyway, so yeah, you can use it, but you don't take it that seriously. It's almost useless, like it almost is useless because you can always explain people's behavior in hindsight, like, oh, that was totally an ISTJ thing to do. But it isn't useless. It particularly comes in use when you have to deal with people who are very different from you. And I've used this. It's almost like a leap of faith. Like this would make no sense to me, but I'm going to put forth this offer, and then I watch it. I watch the situation as I put forth the offer, and it's actually appealing. Like, yeah, there are a lot of examples, but people are motivated by different things, and understanding MBTI has helped me. But what I don't stress over what type somebody is unless I start to struggle to understand them in certain scenarios. But you know what? There's one personality type that I understand it. Like, not really, but I can detect it very quickly. There are a few now, but there's one in particular. I've only known 3, I guess, in my life, like confirmed. But yeah, the ISFJ, for some reason, I've known 4. I look at them, and everything about them, it just fits. You see that they're quiet, they're polite, they're like they're not outwardly trying to connect emotionally with people, but they respond that way. Like they're so willing to tune into the emotional wavelength of the people around them, and I don't know, it's just a vibe that they give off. Also, the clothes they tend to wear, it seems to be very neat and somewhat traditional. And uh, for girls, it tends to be, um, I don't know. Um, it reminds me of like very, like it's not sloppy at all. It very either very clean lines or like really. Uh, it reminds me of like crafts, like decorations or like a tablecloth or something, like a pattern, like flowers, that kind of thing. Um, anyway, so there's there's a there's a girl that my brother has been hanging around a lot lately, and I had spent maybe 5 minutes in the same room as her one time. I don't think we've even made eye contact before. Just she was around, but the way she was talking, and she didn't really get the weirder jokes that my brother was saying. He's an INFJ, and um, the overall vibe, the way she used her voice, is very. Uh, I wouldn't say timid exactly, but um, kind of humble or submissive or quiet, um, and like sweet. But anyway, so he asked me what type I thought she was one time, and I thought for a second. I was like, I'd never thought of it before, and I was like, ISFJ. Yeah, she's probably an ISFJ, and I was right actually. She took the test and she got that. Um, and it's very interesting how some people are really hard to read. Like I live with a guy, and I have lived with him for over 2 years, and I actually don't know what type he is. I've thought of it like I kind of want to say INTP, but it, I do not know. Um, I do not know. So it is kind of random. Um, like I'm not sure. You'd think that it'd be easy to spot an INTP because they should be theoretically only one letter off, but I I don't know. Like I don't even know that's what he is. So who really knows? But um, yeah, I think ISFJs in particular have been very easy to spot for me. The first one I knew was my boss when I worked at Domino's. Actually, two bosses in a row. Um, and they they how I feel about ISFJs in general is that is not how I would live life at all. I am kind of the opposite. The only thing we have in common is we're both introverts. Um, but I mean, technically, you have the fourth letter, but it feels way different because they're trying to organize the world differently than I am. Um, but they seem to like me a lot at first, and because I'm somewhat polite, they keep on liking me. But uh, at one point, inevitably, I say something that is so uh, so bizarre that at that point on, they begin to think of me as kind of weird, but mostly I get the feeling that they see me as kind of a bad person because I will say things that are um, that are maybe taboo, but not that crazy. But just fairly typical of things that an NT type might say. But anyway, so that tends to be how ISFJs and I get along. Basically, we're very nice to each other. It takes a while, but then they they realize that I'm kind of messed up in some ways, just by virtue of the fact that I think and come to very strange, although logical, conclusions about a lot of things. And I do not care about appeasing. Here's an example. One of the ISFJ bosses I had, friends with him on Facebook, and he's been talking about wearing masks for COVID, and how he doesn't think they work. He thinks they're stupid. He thinks there's no reason to be afraid. All these things, but I will still wear them to make other people feel secure. And of course, he's posting it on social media. He really wants everyone to kind of rally around this idea that some of us are a little scared. So even though these are completely useless, let's all do this. And I basically disagree with just about every part of that. Yeah, the solution to the fear part is education. The solution to, no, masks aren't useless. That 5% effective is not useless, and that's only if you're using a used one, or certain ones. They're 20% effective, something like that at least. So they're not useless. And if people are overly scared of COVID, then that is an issue to solve, separate from what we should do. Like, if there are people who decide any random thing, let's say everybody, let's say like 5% of people for some reason are just deathly frightened of hockey sticks, and any mention or sight of hockey just terrifies them because of hockey sticks. So this will probably be a bigger deal in Canada, but people can be really afraid of any random thing, or feel strongly about any random thing, and I do not think the solution is to change all of society for them. I think the solution is to educate or help them overcome this completely irrational and it's a handicap, really. It's, yeah. So, yeah, anyway, I talked too long about that. Anyway, the point is, everything, like, it's so different, the way we do things. But, so that's, I guess I talked a lot about ISFJs, but anyway, you can get a feel for different types with experience, and the more you learn the cognitive functions, and eventually it becomes sort of automatic, and you use it when it's useful and you don't use it when it's not useful. And I don't know, I feel like recently there's been a big surge of interest in MBTI for some reason. Maybe as people have been more chronically stressed and depressed over the pandemic, they have thought about themselves more, and this has pushed people more towards MBTI. Or maybe it hasn't been a recent thing. I haven't been watching that closely, but I feel now when I look at YouTube, there's way more content and way more people creating things than there used to be. So, it's not the answer to everything, but there are real things about it, consistent patterns, and I would find, and people do learn these things without MBTI. People give them certain vibes, and they're like, oh, I've met that type of person before, and it frequently happens that they mislabel them, but like even without MBTI. So if you're worried about that with MBTI, well, it happens anyway. But they might mislabel somebody, and but they might not mislabel them. They might see the thing that's real and just get a feeling like, oh, I think I've met this type of person before. We don't get along. They probably care more about what, about conforming to societal norms than I do. They won't like me. But I should give them the chance to do that, so I will just tell them up front all these things, and it makes people more efficient at finding people that they get along really well with. And I think MBTI would accelerate that process, but it's not a rule that solves everything, and it's honestly not as interesting as a lot of people in MBTI think, like in the MBTI community. It's pretty darn interesting, like the neuroscience aspect of it, but it's and the evolutionary psychology aspect of it, but it's definitely not a solution to everything. So have fun with it if you like it, but calm down a little bit, maybe. All right, I think I'll end it at that. Thanks for listening to me on this edition of me saying a lot of things, unscripted and unplanned, and barely coherent. Okay, bye.